I'm Lynne Hughes-Williams, and welcome to another episode of our Wellbeing series. Today, my guest is Jill Fraser. Jill set up a healthcare charity and training provider that works to combat the isolation of older people by fostering intergenerational connections and promoting creative thoughtfulness in healthcare. Welcome, Jill. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us, Jill, what inspired you to set up Kissing It Better?
Well, it's quite a long story. If you want the whole, uh, I'll do a quick synopsis of it. I am a nurse by training. I trained at St Thomas's Hospital in London at the Florence Nightingale School way back in 1975, where we had lace caps from Belgium that we had to sew up every week. We had the starched aprons that stood up on their own if you literally took them
Right.
off. And we were very traditional. And I learned an enormous amount from that, but I was very lucky. In my third year, I had the opportunity to be one of four British nurses funded by the King's Fund in London to do part of my training in the United States. And I went to the University of North Carolina. I was in Charlotte, the city I was based in, and it was an experience that changed my life. I started there and then we toured up and down the East Coast, ending up in the Philadelphia Children's Hospital. Whilst in Charlotte, we were a lot of attention was paid to us. I think mainly because we had these, quirky uniforms. They were by then already in the uniforms you see today that nurses wear, which are very plain, very practical. And we
Yeah.
had these very complicated, crisp white collars that had to be, literally we had to button them onto our shirts every morning. And we also in Carolina, being quite basic about this, but it's what happened. They were intrigued by our accent. They had the sort of, from Carolina, they've got a much more sort of a very distinctive American accent, and they wanted us to appear in the media. They interviewed us, a lot of newspapers, a lot of radio, and in some cases on the radio, they were just asking me to say, "Could you say the alphabet? Could you say tomato? Could you think, well, this is not what we're here for." Um, but the other three British nurses absolutely hated that. And I kind of said, yes, it's a bit tacky, really, but actually I loved it. And I got very involved in doing the sort of becoming the sort of media rep and writing an awful lot of the stuff up afterwards on their behalf. So we each had our speciality. Mine was pediatrics, so we had to write that up. But then we had an overall report that we had to write, and I was more than pleased to do that. And that, I was quite young. I was 21. I was 20 actually. It went into the Nursing Times, and I was starting to get a taste of media stuff. And I came back, and this is quite important, I feel, that I went to my matron. People say it was much better in those days, and all, we go back to the old-fashioned, characterized by Hattie Jakes in the Carry On films of the matron that ruled the roost. And yes, I have a lot to say about their amazing discipline, but they were not all perfect. And when I went to my matron, who was a bit like Hattie Jakes, and told her that I had been asked to talk to her to say, look, I've had this opportunity. I'm more than happy to talk about it as much as you like in my free time, whatever, to others about the experiences I had. I'll never forget it. She said to me, why would we be interested? So I said, well, I just thought because it's a different way of doing things. I'm not saying it's better. She said, no, you've had your opportunity. You went off and did your stuff out there. Other people don't get it. You put it behind you now and go back to where you were, please, because, we don't all get those chances. And I think we do it rather well in the United Kingdom. So the less said about that, the better. So I
Wow.
thought, wow, okay. But I was determined to get the message out. And at St Thomas's Hospital, they had a hospital radio station. And it was called Radio Becket because St Thomas's is St Thomas of Becket, is why it was founded all those years ago. And I joined it. And in those days, hospitals had an enormous amount of charity money in London, huge amounts of millions of pounds that were sort of stashed away for use for those sort of things. Now, not the millions of pounds for a radio station, but money was available to set up something that was really quite sophisticated. In some ways, not in all, because it was small, they
Mm.
had more sophisticated equipment than the BBC. As a result, down the road where people were working at Broadcasting House, they were coming to St Thomas's to basically use the equipment and to start to further their career. So they might have been very junior, but they wanted to be presenters or reporters. We had good kit. They could go out there. We had an OB unit at one point, slightly unofficially. We were using we seem to have borrowed somebody's kit from some big television program company. Uh, and it attracted the interest of, for example, the studio manager of the Today program. He had his own show, and others, the producer of This Is Your Life, that's actually ITV, was working on the radio station in his spare time. And I learnt from them and I loved it and I was fascinated. I had my own children's program. And on one night, I got somebody contacted me who'd heard us because the hospital radio in the children's area, we wanted it. We did it live. We went onto the floor because the children couldn't understand the radio thing really. We were beaming it through their loudspeakers, but we would have somebody on the ward to kind of hype the children up and get involved in little quizzes and things. I wasn't that person that night. I was back in the studio, but the parents were listening, and the parent contacted me and said, I wondered if you might be interested. I am a producer from Radio One. Would you like to? I think you could be a reporter for us for spare time if you would like to, just as a freelance. And he was the producer of a program called Junior Choice. You're probably far too young to remember it. It was presented by somebody called Ed Stewart or Ed Stewpot on a Saturday morning.
Yes, I do remember.
They'd been criticised because BBC programmes are supposed to educate and inform, and it really didn't educate you very much. So I became their useful information reporter, and I did all sorts of pieces for them. Um, Sort of vaguely health related. I was qualified by the time I started, so how to protect yourself in the sun, how to look after wasp stings and bee stings, that sort of thing as you move through the year. Did it for a while, was then heard by somebody on Woman's Hour on Radio 4. Again, I don't think they thought I was that good, but I think that they wanted somebody who was younger. They were very middle class and very middle aged at that point, and I think because I was in my early 20s, they didn't want me to be the health expert. They wanted me to interview people about young people's conditions and things so that you got a younger voice coming through. And I did that.
My
And
goodness,
then what
that
happened
sounds
was
amazing.
somebody said, you're going to have to choose, Jill. Are you going to be a nurse on the wards or are you going to be a reporter? And that was easy decision to make because basically with nursing, as you still can, you can leave it and go back to it. You can take a break. You cannot say, as you would know, to the BBC, well, I love doing Woman's Hour. Can you just hold the job open for a couple of years while I go back and do my nursing and then come back to it? Because almost certainly I wouldn't be able to do that. I was young, I could take a chance. I thought, right, I'm going to go for this career. I'm slightly simplifying the story, but that's what happened. And then I was contacted I got an agent picked me up and said she would like to represent me. That was fantastic because if you have an agent, you do a lot of things that are not your television or your radio role at that stage. So I was opening Tesco's, I was doing all sorts.
Oh, wow.
Uh, um, and then I got an opportunity to audition for a program called John Craven's News Round. I
Wow.
am not he John Craven was still doing it, if the older people remember that. And I'm not a trained reporter at all. I've never done one proper day of training to be a reporter, but I went for the audition and basically I got it. So I became the John Craven's Newsround reporter. I got it because he was about to leave. There's only one reporter on Newsround. So the person who was the reporter at the time that John Craven was there moved up into his role, and I became the reporter. And we reported, it was terrifying because I'm not a reporter. We reported on the main story of the day, whatever it was. But our role, because back in 1980, whatever it was, early 80s, we were the first news program on television. We didn't have daytime television then. You had the children's programs that started in the afternoon. So News Round at 5 to 5 was the first one. So we were covering extraordinary stories, but to make it less frightening for a child who might catch a bit of it on the early evening news. So we were basically saying, yes, this event is awful, but it's thousands of miles away from England. Or, we were trying to make it less scary for the young people, thinking, oh my gosh, are we all going to be blown up tomorrow or whatever the story was. But yeah, I can say I remember the day when my boss shouted at me, can you go down to Downing Street because I want you to meet with somebody from the Palestinians, I think it was. Could you just summarize the situation in the Middle East in your opening paragraph? Probably not. That's where fear drove you. No mobile phones in those days. You needed to work out who you were going to ask. So it was really a terrifying sort of induction. And also, if you get it wrong on Newsround, you are in so much trouble, more so than the other programs, because we are basically reporting to vulnerable young people who are not of an age to give you any inaccurate
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
So I learnt my trade from that. Some of the stuff would go through to we would do a report, it would be on the main news. They would just lift it off us, which was good for me. And then I got married and I moved to the Midlands and I worked for Central News in the Midlands and I was a regional reporter, but I also did a children's bit for them, and I also did a Friday evening light entertainment slot for them. And then I did a religious magazine I was one of the reporters that could do all sorts of things. So I did a religious magazine program for about 3 years. So the story is that's how I got into it, and then I worked freelance basically. There's another aspect to the story because I had my children and one of them died from a heart condition,
Oh,
and that's the link into the Kissing It Better story that will be coming up in a minute. Because once Eleanor had died, and then my daughter, Eleanor was a twin. She died of a heart condition. Joanna, who's actually here in the house at the moment, she's now 34, but she had health issues. And but one of them, which we'd not heard about much of in 1992, was that because she was then, she was one then, she had a massive peanut allergy, which nobody knew about. So within a year, I nearly lost two children.
oh my goodness.
And it was really helpful. After Eleanor died, and I was approached by the media to say, "Can you tell your story? Can you talk about the death of Eleanor?" No, thank you very much. It was a very negative story, and it's possibly an avoidable death, so I really didn't want to talk about it. But when Joanna
Understandable.
nearly died, or perhaps it technically did for a few moments when she'd eaten a peanut, not that we knew about peanut butter sandwich.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I was up for that one. So I'm one of the founder members of the anaphylaxis campaign, and I saw then that a small group of people could make a huge difference. It will be, I think of my gravestone. People say, "What would you put on your gravestone?" I'm one of three people responsible for the phrase "may contain nuts,"
Okay.
which
Interesting.
transformed what
Yes.
children knew what was and wasn't safe to eat.
Right.
Because
Wow.
it's so difficult to navigate a system where you weren't sure what the ingredients of something could be. In those days, jelly tots. Do you remember jelly tots?
I do,
Well,
yeah.
they carry a peanut risk because they're made on the same conveyor belt as they make chocolate coated nuts.
Okay.
So there is a tiny risk. Well, they would not be now, but they were in those days. At least that's what we were told, that
Yeah.
a tiny bit of nuts could possibly be in and that would have been enough to kill some children.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it's been in the headlines, haven't it? Not, well,
So
quite recently, really.
it has.
Significant. So, yeah, just that one phrase in there.
Yeah.
Make
So
it
yeah,
into,
we didn't expect it to be on the front of a nut packet, but but that's how seriously they took the
yes.
the slogan.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's
great.
a lot that's a story in its own right doing that. But yeah, it was a challenge. We had to take on the big supermarkets to do that, Tesco's who were and others, or Tesco, Sainsbury's, whatever, to see if they would actually introduce this because changing the labeling is a big deal.
So, how long did that take to happen? A couple of
Oh gosh,
years,
it's
did
sort
it?
of, well over time. I can't remember it. I think a few years before, but I was able to use the media. Newsround covered the story, I can tell you,
Yes. Yeah.
and others. Yeah.
I do remember Newsround. Yes. Yeah, it was really useful.
Yeah, it was fun. It was and it very environmental. We didn't talk about sort of dates. We'd say, "Oh, you'll be joining us in National Tree Week and you'll be leaving us on Save a Whale Week," because we were very much honing in on those campaigns, which children could connect with much more easily.
Yes. Shame Newsround isn't around now, really,
I
isn't
think
it?
no, it is still around, but it's
Oh, is
tucked
it?
away on the CBBS or something somewhere down
Oh, so it's
there. Well,
still
as far as
getting
I
to.
know, I've spoken to them recently. We did news round during the pandemic.
Oh, right. Okay. So still about then.
Yes, still about,
Oh,
still
great.
about.
I didn't know that. But of course, I don't watch CBB, so that might explain it.
Working with the anaphylaxis campaign taught me that a small group of people can make a big difference. And I think that seed of thought stayed with me for a while. As I say, I can't emphasize enough, I didn't start that charity, but being part of it and a passion often in an organization, the person that's leading it is driven by a passion because whatever that charity is, something within them has connected them to that whatever they're trying to achieve. And so I
Mm.
think that thought stayed with me. Obviously, as Joanna was growing up, I was very keen to support her in any way I could. That's a whole new chapter of how vulnerable these young people were if people weren't informed and didn't understand exactly what the implications were of how our diets could really impact on her if it all went wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's so but then there was I can go seamlessly on to the next question if you like.
Right. For those of you who've not heard of Kissing It Better, is that what you mean? Yeah. Right. For those of you who may not have heard of Kissing It Better, how would you describe the charity, what the charity does in a nutshell?
So basically, I looked after my children and brought them up. I was working freelance in and out between doing all sorts of different things, but I was also looking after my mother who was developing dementia and she had a number of other conditions.
Mm.
And when she was 69 and a very active member, she ran a rambling, she always, so I start again. So let me start again. I'll get that fluent now.
Okay.
So yeah, I was very involved in the anaphylaxis campaign as the children were growing up, and then they obviously went off and did whatever they did when they left school. But I was also looking after my mother, who had some dementia issues, and also she had other health conditions that she was trying to manage. And she was perfectly able to live an independent life in many ways and continue that until gradually her dementia got a little more challenging for her. But she was a very enthusiastic walker. She was very good at sport and she had run a rambling club in the area and she was very key in the Children's Society charity. So she was a house to house fundraiser and always involved in many of their fundraising events.
Mm.
But then one afternoon she had a fall and she was on blood thinning drugs and she banged her head and she, aged 69, then didn't speak or move for the next 2 years of her life until she
Oh
died.
dear.
So suddenly I was back by her bedside and being the nurse again, as I had to some extent been the nurse again when my children were very, very ill. And as I sat by her bedside then, which was 2009, care in hospitals was not as good as it should be. You may remember the Mid Staffordshire inquiry, where they said that people were drinking the vase water because they were not getting
Yes.
fluids. And I knew that when I was doing that I would be probably be asked about this because the seeds of Kissing It Better was starting to start, where I sat by her bedside and thought, could I make a difference again? Could a small group of people actually impact on healthcare in some way? Because the headlines were endlessly negative at that time. And what was happening, and I could see it because my children were that age, was that I could see around me that nurses were leaving. They were fed up with it all, the bad publicity. You don't really want to be associated with an organization when regularly the headline was a horror story about the NHS or care. So they were leaving. Those that remained were pretty disillusioned because often staff weren't replaced fast enough, and they were also getting told off by relatives for things not being good enough, even though a lot of it wasn't entirely that individual's fault. But what concerned me is that I've missed out a bit of the story because I do quite a lot of writing. So I'd go into schools and talk about anaphylaxis and about other things. But then I did ask those schools, how many of you, say a big sixth form with 400 or 500 students in it, how many of you are considering nursing as a career? I can tell you now, in most cases, not one. Those nurses now are coming from, in the main, the further education colleges where they're doing health and social care. Certainly in England, that's how it works. And they get a level 3 and they go off to university. They haven't got an A levels, they've got a level 3, which is very good.
Yeah.
And they're going through that route. And some of them are really going into it without enough work experience. So when they get there, they think it'll be all glamorous like they've seen on the television. And of course, the reality is rather different. So then they leave. That's dreadful for the NHS that they're losing those students, but also very disillusioning for those young people who've started a career that hasn't worked out. They've now got to think of something else and they're kind of out of sync with their friends because they're a couple of years behind if they join another course. And I thought, this is dreadful. So, what can we do to make a difference to people like my mum? Because I had been very vocal in my criticism of my mother's care when I'd been there. I'm very polite, but my husband would say at my most dangerous when I'm very polite.
Okay, I'll
Can
bear that in mind.
I raise an issue with you, please?
Mm.
And and a friend of mine was in a similar situation. Um, And I thought, can we make a difference? And I said to her, she knew I'd done it before with another group. And because of my media background, I felt we needed something simple because at that time, the NHS and the health and social care websites were so wordy that you couldn't be bothered to read the stuff because it was almost like how many words can you fit on a page without a picture in a very boring font and tiny to get more words in, they'd make it smaller and smaller font size kind of thing, or very, very, very sort of very boring style, I mean. But basically, we thought about it and we came up with the phrase kissing it better. We wanted to do something that was positive, and we would not have called it that in 2025. I've had people say, oh, you can't use the word kissing. That's awful. You can't. And then what does that imply? I go, listen, we chose kissing it better KISS actually stands for Keep It Simple, KIS.
Yeah.
We wanted a charity that was only positive. We acknowledge the negativity. We certainly do that. I've just done it just now. But we were endlessly positive wherever we were because we knew we wouldn't survive. If we go into a hospital and start criticizing them, they're not going to want us to stay.
Mm.
And also, if you keep reading endlessly negative press, you start to get rather bored with the whole thing. So we thought, no, we need to do something positive. Could we create a charity of simple ideas? Simple in as much as it could start with, it could could help if all receptionists smiled at you and looked up and greeted you when you went into a waiting area. They don't all do that. Some of them are busy, they're just on their screens and they're kind of name, age, and they're not even looking at you.
Mm.
But there are a lot of simple ideas that are a lot more imaginative than that. And could we put them on a website? So if you'd seen, created, or experienced a simple idea that had made a difference to you or somebody you were caring for, could you share it with us as long as it didn't cost any money? I didn't want to be seen to be ripping off other people's brilliant ideas that they were then going to, make money out of.
Mm.
Um, and that's how it started. And we divided the categories into 15 so that you couldn't give me an idea that wouldn't go into one of them. So we looked at things like comfort. So that was the first one, and surroundings. So let's take surroundings as the start. That's actually the first one
Yes.
on the list. It's random which order they're in. In other words, if you're in hospital, if you're near a window, you probably enjoy the experience more because if you're bored, you can look out the window and see the view.
Mm.
Is that the surroundings are not just about what you can see? Is it nicely painted? Does it feel clean? Is it warm enough for you? Are there any noises that are you putting you off? Is the smell unpleasant because they put you too near to the loo? Umpteen reasons why surroundings can be improved, and there are plenty of simple ideas that can improve that. I insisted in the end that my mum was the only person on her ward who couldn't move at all. So is there any possibility when somebody eventually went home that she could have the bed near the window?
Mm.
And they did do that. But then I said, but actually, if she was about 6 inches higher in her bed, she could see out of it because we were upstairs and the window was quite high and her bed was quite low. And they went, oh, that would look odd. And I said, well, does it matter? She can't move. She's not going to fall out of bed. If you could leave it elevated, all these beds do that, she can see out of the window. And I then said, actually, if the curtain was the other side, because the curtain's blocking her view, it would extend her view. If you opened the window, she could hear the noises outside just a little bit. And even if it was a cold day, she could get a sense of the wind, a little bit of a sense of the world outside her window, as long as it wasn't disturbing anybody else. Because
Yeah.
they only a fraction anyway. And they did all that. And that's what I'm talking about, simple ideas. It doesn't cost any money. That's just a simple thing. But believe me, I haven't got time to tell you that was not as simple as any, you might think to make that happen. It had to go through a selection of people coming to see whether it was practical to do that, whether it was a health and safety risk. It would be slightly out of a line with other beds. But I won. You
All
have to.
the red tape behind
Yeah,
it.
exactly. So that's just one of thousands of ideas that we were getting. And then there was a moment when we changed the trajectory of what we did because I was beginning to talk about kissing it better in quite big venues. I spoke in the House of Lords at an event.
Oh, wow.
I spoke at the QE2 Centre in London in the main Churchill room, which is a huge room. And we were in all the national newspapers. And then there was a moment when the Daily Mail contacted us and said, we'd like you in our Sunday supplement. And there's a bit of a funny story for that because the politics of this house was certainly was that, oh, you're going to go in the Daily Mail. That's a little bit controversial. I'm being a bit mischievous here with but anyway, I'm a journalist. By then, I would consider myself a journalist. I wanted to know exactly how they were going to portray me, and they were very good about it. They were very good about it. They said it would change us forever, and it did. We did a 3-page spread for them in the Mail on Sunday You magazine, I think it was called. And on the morning, I came downstairs on the Sunday and I heard a funny noise. And in those days, your computer pinged when an email, mine did, it pinged when an email came in.
Mm.
And I could just hear ping, 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 ping. We had nearly 20,000 people contact me that day.
Wow.
Hey, thank you for doing what you're doing. We want to get involved. It was a bit early for us to do that because we couldn't just embrace the 20,000 and go, oh, come and work with us. But it did change the way that we felt about what we were doing. And that's how the name came about. We call the name Kissing It Better because it is the simplest idea that I can think of that makes the biggest difference. When a child falls over, they pause, that little child, they pause, they scream or they cry, and they run to the person they most trust. Not their abuser, the person they most trust, their mum, their dad, their granny, whoever. And a simple act of rubbing the wound or kissing it better, and within 5 minutes, in most cases, they're back on the climbing frame. They needed that reassurance not to be worried about it, not to be frightened. They'll be fine. Get up and go back to playing where you were before.
Yeah.
We used to say it was in every English speaking country in the world. So America, Australia, parts of South Africa, Canada use the phrase kissing it better in exactly the same way. When the pandemic happened and we then connected with children via Zoom across the world, they said to us, Jill, Switzerland, Spain, France, Germany, China, Russia, India, we have the same phrase. You may not understand it because it's in our language. It is a universal phrase for a simple act of kindness that can make the world of difference. So I defend it. People say to me, people have been really cruel. Actually, you should respect a name. There's been a big campaign in the NHS to whatever your name is, people should remember it, even if you prefer to be called by your nickname. And actually, when people say to me, I don't like the name Kissing It Better, I think it's offensive. Very few people say that, but they're always the ones that are vocal. And I go, well, give me 3 minutes and I will explain. It's so sad when you can't use the word hug anymore, and you people say, oh, you can't hug somebody because it's incorrect. These are often the simple acts that people will talk about to us when that nurse gave them a hug when they'd had a diagnosis that was not what they were expecting. That physical connection done appropriately for me is such an important part of care.
Yes, yes, I would agree with that.
So touch, the act of loving touch. But again, we have to be careful how we say that. But yeah, hand on your shoulder, a support, because often you do actually physically feel wobbly. If somebody gives you bad news, you might want to be helped into a chair.
Yes, yeah,
God, don't touch me. We learn that some people don't like being touched, and that's fine. So you
mm,
ask, is it okay? But generally, you intuitively know when somebody is almost, you can see in their body language, they're reaching out to you to connect other than through speech.
yes, yeah. And that arm, hand on the shoulder, as you
It's just
said,
that reassurance. It's just,
yes,
God, I think we just sometimes, I wonder what future generations will look back on our generation and go, you just lost your way slightly when some of this. And I do totally understand, please, that it is not appropriate. I don't go, we're not about kissing. We don't do any kissing
no,
in
no,
together.
no,
It is an expression that is understood by nearly everybody in the world.
yes, yeah.
So that's that.
Jill, can you share a few examples of the kinds of intergenerational, that's such a long word, intergenerational activities you bring to care homes or hospitals?
We started the charity, we had it as a kind of send your ideas to us and we will share them on our website.
Mm,
But I realized very quickly through my knowledge of media, etc., that actually it's probably wasn't what people were going to come and home and do. So they've been visiting their loved one in hospital in a care home or caring for somebody in their own home. In the evening, they want to put their feet up and watch the telly. They don't want to trawl through websites looking at ideas. We had to make it more proactive, if you like. So, having given lots of talks, one talk I gave, a director of nursing who was new to a hospital, actually up in Walsall, which is sort of north of Birmingham, said to me, we're not doing so well with our care in the hospital. I'm new, so obviously it wasn't her responsibility. Well, it was about to be her responsibility, but she hadn't been there when it was happening. Can you come and help us? And I just said yes, without any really clear idea of how I do it. And when I went up there and she was saying to me, "Oh, Jill's going to sort this out," I think, "Oh, am I? How?" Kind of help, panic. And I went into a room afterwards. I can't think why, but I was in a room on my own and there was a big table, a big circular table there. And I sat there and I imagined the hospital as a building, as a piece of the center of the table. And the surrounding table would be the catchment area of that hospital. And I just thought, what if I engage with the schools, colleges, drama groups, sports groups, all those groups that have young people wanting work experience for their future career. They could come in groups. I would not call them volunteers because that means they've got to go through a whole long training that can take months. They can come in as visitors with their tutor. It would be fully DBS checked or all the requirements you have to be safe. And they could deliver care that would make a huge difference. And I started with the college. I went to the college because my mother had had hand massages on a Monday when she was in hospital and she loved it just by a lady who came in. But at the college, they had goodness knows how many students doing hair and beauty courses, beauty therapy and hair
mm,
dressing. And I said to their tutor, could you come in and do your work experience on the wards? People who are in long term having had a stroke or they've got dementia. And she said, "You won't get us in." And I said, "I think I might, because I'm going to bring you in as a visiting group. You don't have to DBS acquire at Christmas when they come in, because they come in fully supervised and then they go out again." It was a similar idea.
Okay.
And I won with that one easily. They came in within 2 weeks. And they came in, and all over the country, hair and beauty students are, or all over the UK, I think now in many areas, they're coming in, and to we're based in England, but Wales, they will be doing that in certain hospitals. It caught on. We even had a hairdressing salon at one of the hospitals where people, as part of their rehabilitation, could walk down and get their hair done. Like many, being sexist here, like many women, you come down to get your hair done, but you come for a change of environment, a bit of a chat, a cup of tea. There's something rather special and kind of lovely, if you like that sort of thing, about having your hair done or your nails done. And they came in, and then in came the health and social care students, in came the performing arts students who would dance for people or do a little play. The music students would come in and sing or play instruments. And so it went on. They'd come in big groups, or they'd come in after school if they were at school in smaller groups, always fully supervised. Those young people are never out of our sight. Um, and it's not that we're so much worrying about the young people doing something inappropriate where the patients are around. I don't know anything about the patients. So, I could have somebody who's got all sorts of convictions in bed 3, or I don't know. So it works both ways. And I absolutely firmly believe it's a safer element because we're there constantly supervising them all. And it's not that when the hairdressing, it's lovely because the chatting is very easy because you chat as you're doing it. But with the music, it's just a couple of songs, maybe in each bay. They might sing quite a lot more than that, but they'll move around the wards. It's a catalyst to start a conversation rather than go into that ward and go, "I'm doing Duke of Edinburgh's award. Can I talk to you for 20 minutes, please? Because I need to tick a box." This is, we've thought about it. We're bringing you a gift of music, a gift of drama, a gift of art. They might make cards. They might bring in all sorts of things. We bring in animals as well, but that's a slightly different scheme that we run with therapy animals. And that's for students who are doing veterinary courses. They, part of their experience, they learn how to pack up the animals and how to keep them well fed and watered while they're out there, and how to keep them safe. So it works both ways, and that's the model for Kissing It Better. But more than that, now the overall reason for doing this is that we are educating young people now from the age of 4. We have a contract with some nursery schools to take little children into hospitals and care homes, to normalize it and to teach them what old age can mean, so that they will have a better and more intelligent relationship with their own grandparents, their neighbors, their parents, older friends, as well as seeing and learning by week after week, embedding what we've taught them, to understand that, if on a practical level, if you're 4, if an older person's coming, can you please pick up your toys off the floor, because their sight might not be as good and they might fall over your toys. It
Mm.
starts that, and to learn how to listen, and to learn how to not look bored and not say to Granny, "You've told me that 3 times already," because with the older children especially, they will understand why Granny says that 3 times, why dementia has made her repeat herself, because she's got no short-term memory. She doesn't remember she's already said it 3 times. So it's about teaching them, whether it's poor sight, poor hearing, poor speech, mobility issues, pain that older people are often in, or mental, in other words, they've got dementia or other issues. Teaching a younger generation to understand, so that they really learn from the richness of a much older generation, their wisdom, their stories, which are much better than the ones online. Am I right? So that's what we do.
How are you delivering this? Do you have volunteers that join Kissing It Better? How are the practicalities of delivery?
So what we do is we connect with the existing volunteers in a hospital and say, "Do you want to join us as part of the Kissing It Better program?" They already have been through all the processes to become a volunteer, and they help us supervise the events. So we go to the schools, we teach them. The younger children are taught something through a project called When Great Granny Came to Stay, which is a book I wrote, and it's a very colourful cartoon book. And then I'll put it. And for the older children, we do a course called Creative Thoughtfulness in the Care of Others. In other words, creative, use what you're good at to be thoughtful to other people. So you might be brilliant about, some children say to us from very deprived areas, particularly, or they've not loved school, "I'm not good at anything." And I go, "Okay, do you support a football team?" "Yeah, I support Manchester United," or "I support," whatever it might be, Cardiff City, whatever. And they will say, I'll say, well, that's your skill. I will connect you with a fellow's football supporter on the ward, and I will have to prize you away from each other at the end because you both will have all the answers to the Welsh team, the English team, whatever team it might be. You'll have done better than the manager the way that you talk, and that will be so lovely for the older person to talk to you about their shared passion. So
Is this being delivered in Wales as well? Is it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I've given speeches in Cardiff. We've worked with Swansea University. We're currently working with Swansea University on a project called Drama in Care Homes. And what we do, my wonderful colleague Susan, who's won a BAFTA for writing in television. I met her through television, but she's chronically sick herself and she's older. She just loves picking up short, fun plays from the 1960s and 70s, the kind of carry-on type plays, the sort of slightly mischievous ones. She goes into care homes and working with their activity organizers, they literally sit them around a table and they might dress up. And they will basically rehearse it and they will do that play a bit like a radio. I'd love you to do it. We've got quite a few of them as radio plays. Yes, so that's what we do. And I think we spoke about it when I talked to you before about that, and it's
Yes.
worked really well. So the children get involved. And what we've discovered, we're now doing a research project with Swansea University. We've been doing for about 2 years, and maybe not quite as long as that, over a year. They want to evidence the fact that actually people in care homes often don't mix very well as people. They sit in the same chair every day. They tend to not even talk to some people who they think they won't like, so they don't go anywhere near them.
Right.
But the players force them to obviously interact with everybody. And some people have said it's the best thing they've ever done since, in the last few years because they're all funny, mischievous plays. In fact, she's very naughty sometimes. I say, gosh, these are very mischievous. They're not rude, but
No.
they're quite funny plays. And that's that we do that as well. But we basically are working across, yeah, Wales in all sorts of ways. I was recently in Wales, in your beautiful Pembrokeshire. I was in,
Oh,
and I was at St David's, and I was at where were the Tenby, and always looking for ways to connect with care homes because that is quite an easy way in for us. Sadly, since the pandemic, it's got harder to get the young people into hospitals. There's always a rule that pops up, and they stop us sometimes from coming in. When I know the greater good, in my opinion, is that they should.
yeah,
Otherwise, we're just
yeah.
staring at walls.
As it
So that
happens, we're currently working on a project as well with a care home, Valley View Care Home in Kevin Hengoed, where interviews are being done with the residents, the treasured memories basically about their lives, and so we are then promoting that on our website and Spotify. So, yeah, it's beautiful work.
it's lovely to do that, and it is so important for us because you've got so many people feeling lonely and sort of brave about it. Many people said to us that in the pandemic, it was highlighted that people live on their own, they couldn't get out, and it was really, really sad for those people. And or if they were in care homes and they weren't getting visits from their relatives, but quite a lot of older people, lots have said to us, it was like that before the pandemic, we weren't getting out. It was like that in care homes. So many people in care homes never get a visitor. It's not it's not any different. So actually in the pandemic, at least the focus was on us to try and do something about it. You might get some nice charity that drops off something on your doorstep who actually takes an interest in you because there was the pandemic and it was so much in our face of what these people were facing in terms of isolation. But loneliness, we've done a report for the government that was shown to the government where we interviewed a lot of people about their feelings about old age. And it's now a recommendation to the government that our courses become part of the national curriculum. That's not necessarily going to happen, but it has been formally sent to the government by an organisation that is very influential on policy making to
That would
say
be amazing, wouldn't it?
we haven't got, we just can't look after all the old people that we've got at the moment effectively. There's a terrible shortage of staff in
Mm.
care homes, and somebody talks about 131,000 job vacancies across, I don't know
There.
quite what area of the United Kingdom that is. I don't know, but that is a number that comes. But even so, whatever it is, whether it's one country or the whole of the United Kingdom, it's a staggeringly large number. So it's important to me not just to teach young people to understand old age and the immense wisdom and joyous stories and very interesting stories from within, not all of them are joyous, from older people. But we also, you remember a story that you've been told by somebody who experienced something better than facts or perhaps misleading facts that you might read increasingly online. when you're
Yes.
stuck
Yeah.
in your bedroom and so much is not quite the real truth. So that's what we do. But it's not just the older people who are lonely. Huge numbers of young people stuck in their bedrooms think they've got friends on Facebook and Instagram, but in fact, they're not real friends. They are desperately lonely themselves. So
Yeah.
we hope that that connection, especially when mum and dad haven't always got time because they're working full time, an older person that you connect with who's got time to listen to you as a younger person and give you intelligent advice. Stop worrying about your exams. They're not the be all and end all of life. There are other things that you can do that make you a successful person. And I think that's how we want it to grow, is that we've got young people now. One of our young people is now a trustee of the charity. She's one of the most brilliant medical students in her fourth year, and that is quite a senior position in a charity to be one of the trustees. But we
Yes.
have ambassador programs, senior ambassador programs, as those students now become part of our team. So I think it's so important in these troubled times that we listen to the other views of other people. People are becoming quite polarized in their views. And I think we explain grandfather, great grandmother may have a different view to you on life. Before you say they're wrong or they should be cancelled, or whatever the expression they use these days,
Yes. Cancel culture. Yes.
in my opinion, you need to listen. And I say to them sometimes, you go on and on about what you think is this, this, and this. Let's see what your great grandchildren think of you in 60 years' time, because they will possibly have different views and be equally strident. It's what young people do. They are very strident. But by listening to the context of an older person's thoughts, yeah, they are. I remember the classic one that we wrote about because we produced several books, and one of the students was moaning about their lot in the pandemic, and they were at university and the canteen was shut and their lectures were disrupted, and her mother said to them, uh, your grandfather was in Burma when he was your age. Let me just tell you a bit about the malaria, the terrible battles he was in, the separation from his loved ones with no means of communication. And let's now go back to your problem with the canteen being shut
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I
and
can
get
see
a
how that would
sense of
work.
perspective. And she said it was rather cruel of me to do that, but he needed a sense of perspective in what he was having to suffer for the time when he'd had to go out for a pizza rather than buy it downstairs. So, and I'm not, I'm being a bit mean there because their exams were disrupted. I'm not saying that that was easy for them, but you
No.
get another take on what, life's not always easy, and many people much older than them have lived through a world war.
Yes. Yeah. That's
Or
right. I
and then
mean,
you just
life does present many challenges, doesn't
yeah.
it?
So it is the biggest, but the biggest challenge, you ask about the biggest challenge, we face at one point, and it is keeping going. There's no money around. We can't, a lot of us are volunteers, but we can't run on no money. There are so many rules now that stop things happening, where our argument is we understand why you have to have rules, but some of them you really need to look at them because life is a managed risk. Otherwise, I would never drive a car. I would never make myself a cup of tea because I could get burnt.
Mm.
And I think we've slightly lost sight of the fact that we drive a car knowing that people are killed in cars every week, but they don't ban cars. And
No.
we've got to have a sense, because recently I got stopped. I made a cup of tea for some consultants and senior doctors. Oh, in fact, all the doctors in a hospital, I won't name it. And I got a very strict email. It's not my role to go and get tea from the canteen for them.
Oh. Okay.
And that was quite shocking to me, that you could actually send me. And I'm quite old enough to go and get a cup of tea for them. It was my money. They
Yeah.
was so broken and busy. I said, look, I'm going to go and get some tea from the canteen, that you can have it when you have a break. And I'm not allowed to do that.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it is. It's caused quite a lot of fuss since, because we did raise it as an issue. It's not a private story now, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the sort of level we're dealing with. Somebody found a rule. I don't know what rule it was really. So yes, but that's fine. That's in everybody's walk of life. There's always those
Mm.
issues. But yeah, so it's very hard work to do it. I love it. I love meeting people and hearing their stories. I love looking at different ways to connect. One of the latest things we've done, which we'd love to do in Wales, is that we create social prescribing calendars. 200 things you can do if you're over 55 and frail, because we realized that there was stuff going on in every community, but nobody knew where to find it.
Okay.
Simply don't know, and an awful lot of the information online is out of date. So if you are, you'd say, well, I'd love my. It's amazing what's online. If you're in in certain parts of the country, in Islington, we found one in London. You can do over 55's Lego clubs.
Okay.
Or you can do over 50s Egyptian dancing, or
Mm,
you can do table tennis for the partially sighted, or you can do boxing if you've got Parkinson's disease. Who knew? Maybe you
yeah.
did, but not
No,
everybody knows.
no.
And but they need the footfall for people to join that. And just to get out and have a cup of coffee and a chat with somebody, even if you don't want to get involved fully in the activity, a lot of these things are free.
So how is that project working?
So we work with young people and ourselves. We get approached, we get offered funding to do this, and we go to an area and we contact the big organizations, the leisure centre, the library, the older people's charities, and we say to them, what do you do to offer something for older people or people who have poor sight, poor hearing, poor vision, sorry, poor sight, poor hearing, poor speech, mobility issues, they might be in pain, they might, as I say, have mental health issues.
Mm,
What do you do over the course of a month that can help them? And they'll say at the leisure centre, oh, we have a senior swimming session where we don't have any young people rushing around. We have, as I say, table tennis for the partially sighted, Nordic walking where you can go with poles, health care walks where you can go with a nurse. So you might have diabetes, but somebody's on hand if you have a hypoglycemic attack, or that if you're a little bit frail and you need that extra support. Um, they have pub clubs where you can get picked up from your home and taken to the pub and you have a pub meal, and of course you're not driving, so you can have a drink and you can come home again. It might be gentle yoga, seated tai chi, um, knit and natter, sewing clubs, art clubs. The list goes on. 200 of them at least every month we found in every area. We've done 7 of them. We're about to start our 8th calendar. So we cover the whole of Birmingham, the whole of Wiltshire, South Dorset, areas of London, and we want to do it in Wales. We would love to do it in Wales because you have so many crafts and things that you do up there. Dancing
yes.
courses, all
Yeah.
sorts of things. It's an enormous amount of work, and we've got a formula for doing it, but so much was out of date that was online. And also, once you put something online, you forget about it. So people find it, it's out of date. You ring the number, that person's no longer working there. You go to the venue, they've moved venues. So we've basically hope we've tidied up the system a bit because we do them bi-monthly. So we've just done um, June and July
So you're saying there'll be one calendar to find out what is happening in your area.
in your area. And we do say you
Mm,
might like to check just occasionally, and in the middle of winter, maybe it'll get cancelled for some reason. But that is what's going on in your area, and it's hundreds of different ideas. And then at the back of the calendar, so it just very simply says what it is. So it says Nordic walking, 10 o'clock, I don't know, Cardiff Leisure Centre. And then you go to the back and it'll say, here's the phone number linked to it. Here's the postcode of part of the full address of Cardiff Leisure Centre. And it's Mary you want to talk to. So you've got that, and so you've got that information at the back, but on the calendar, to stop making it too busy, it just says reading rebel. I'm just thinking of reading clubs. There's so many
yes.
different things. And it'll just say reading club, 9:30, the local library, the leisure centre, whatever it might be. And it's all it's like a calendar. So it's just exactly you hang it on your wall.
Excellent. That's something we can certainly have a conversation about
I would
an
love to
update.
because it would be really helpful. I mean, as I say, I've just spent a week in Wales and I'm absolutely what beautiful countryside you have. Walking along the Pembrokeshire coast was just fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
And wanting any excuse to go back there. And Swansea, with you've got the Swansea, you've got a university on the beach. What's not to like? And the all that stuff there, And it's so absolutely. And my dad was a great football supporter, so we used to go to Cardiff City Football Club as a kid. He used to take me there when there were certain matches. He didn't support Cardiff City, but for some reason they played them several times, and we always went to Cardiff to
Yes.
cheer our team on. So
Brilliant.
yeah, there's lots. We are running a course now on a Thursday afternoon about dementia. You asked me about the misunderstandings of dementia.
Mm,
The main misunderstandings are I've heard people say, oh, my father's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We're so relieved it's not dementia. It's the
mm,
same thing. It's the same thing. Dementia, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. They
yes.
don't understand that it's not just about losing your memory. It's about losing your balance. It can be, not for everybody. It's about sequencing. It's about there's so many different forms of dementia that it's unfair to say it's just about a memory loss, but what are the implications of that memory loss? Many people don't understand when they say to somebody, They don't remember what day of the week it is. And I say to somebody, we've just had a bank holiday. Did you not think Tuesday was Monday? If it's Christmas, we almost pride ourselves in saying, I've got no idea what day of the week it is.
Yes, yeah.
Doesn't take much for us to lose our sense of it, and yet we accuse people with dementia going, they don't know what day of the week it is. Well,
Mm.
often people without dementia suffer those same issues. And it's about suffer's a bad word. You shouldn't use that. You can live well with dementia. All of our team are dementia champions trained by the Alzheimer's Society, so we give a lot of talks on things like that. What we've loved about the charity is the extraordinary connection made between young and old. And one of the connections that stands out so strongly for me is that another project we're doing, that we had a young person who's joined us right from the beginning of the pandemic. So she's been with us about 5 years now.
Mm.
And that person is very disabled. They have cerebral palsy. They are in a wheelchair. The person said is 18 years old now, but started when they were 13. And one of the older people that would come on our Zooms when we were connecting during the pandemic, where we took everything that we were stopped from going into care homes and hospitals. So we discovered this new thing called Zoom. Well, I'm sure it had been around for a while, but we hadn't used it. We took our message onto Zoom so that we connect with older people who had an iPad, who were in a care home where they could do it as part of a group with their activity coordinator when they were locked inside that care home, or when they were at home on their own. And we would do those meetings at least once a day, and the young people would come on and they could get their hours of volunteering that they needed for the Duke of Edinburgh Award. We are approved activity providers for the Duke of Edinburgh's award, so that made it very easy. And June was in a care home in an electric wheelchair, and Ace was in a wheelchair aged 13, and a little bit, well, I think she was 14 when she first met her, and they bonded.
Wow.
And what has been brilliant about that connection, both of them mischievous. When you are that young person in an electric wheelchair, you can say things that others can't say about disability and get away with it. And at least I think you can. Why would you ever want to criticize her? And both talked very honestly. And Ace would say, people understand, they say, oh, you can't walk, you can't walk. And like, oh, you can't write. That's not my biggest issue. My biggest issue is that I get carers coming in sometimes if my carer is away. She has a wonderful mother, but she can't manage it all on her own. She has a sibling who's disabled as well. So they have carers that come in, and and they said, how do you think I feel when I'm a teenager and a new carer not much older than me comes in, and the first thing they have to do is take me to the loo and wipe my bum?
Mm.
And nobody thought about it. The young people have, you can see their faces. I hadn't thought about that. I just thought she couldn't walk. It's about seriously. And June was then talking about her life. And between them, we realized that Ace knew more about what was out there as aids for people who were disabled than June in a care home did, because Ace is at
Yes.
school. So she's getting fed the latest information from all of that. And um, that was really quite an interesting connection to be made, because Ace was then suggesting to June, have you tried this? You could get this on Amazon. You don't have to spend lots of money at a specialized center. Amazon sell this kit and it's much cheaper, and it will transform the way that you eat your meals. So Ace was the person that instigated June having a heated mat, so it kept her
Yes.
food warm, because June ate more slowly. A guard around the plate that stopped her shoving the food straight onto the floor because her hands didn't work so well. And the most magical thing, because it always freaks me out when it happens, a kind of music stand with grips on it so you can put your iPad on it. Because every so often when we talk to older people, there's a crash and suddenly the iPad's looking at the ceiling and we're not sure if they've fainted or passed out. So it's
Yes.
about those simple things. So that's what's really been powerful for us. Um, the vision for the future for Kissing It Better is to educate the whole generations as they come through to understand what old age can mean and how they can connect and learn from the wisdom of a much older person, because there's such mutual benefit, particularly as the internet becomes, in many cases, so unreliable with AI and everything else. You don't know whether what you're reading is true, even the film you're watching, denoting a news story, is accurate. That
Mm.
they listen and value that older generation, and that the older generation values the lovely things that they can share with the much younger generation. Our research shows us that most older people, this is pretty obvious, they don't want to talk about being old. They want to be remembering the mischief of their youth, which
Yes. Yeah.
Mischievous because we didn't have iPhones in those days or mobile phones. So we were out all day. I certainly was of a generation. I went out on my own in the holidays with my mates,
Yeah.
and I was wise enough not to tell my mum some of the mischief we got up to when I came back in the evening. Nothing bad, but because I knew if I said to my mum, "Oh, I fell off my bike," her reaction would be, "Did you hurt anybody else?" Were you being stupid? Why did that happen? Rather than me going, "Oh, it's really funny, Mum, I fell off my bike when I went around the corner." She would be, "Oh, this is bad. You shouldn't be doing that." So we learnt in a different way without having to do everything, letting our mum and dad know where we were, knew what we know, clocking in every 5 minutes.
Yes.
So we're trying to bring back and how much they have in common. Older people, they read the same books as these. The children don't realize that Paddington Bear's been around for 63, or I was going to say
Mm.
70 years, or that Winnie the Pooh's 100 years old. They simply don't have. They think it's all something that was created by Disney. Well, not all of them, but some of them think it's that these are all products of the film industry rather than a book that was written many years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think it is in these troubled times, it is so important that we respect a much older generation who've been through these, not the same troubled times, but, times of war and things that maybe that we can learn and get the young people to get a sense of perspective on what they're seeing and hearing out there, um, and just having fun and loving the opportunity
Mm.
to learn from those people before it's too late, before they've died.
Yes. Yeah. It's great to capture those memories, isn't it?
And I suppose the final thing we had I'm going to get the quote wrong here, but we had somebody very senior in this country come and sit in on one of our sessions. And
Mm.
I wasn't that nervous because I'd written the teaching program, but he asked a lot of questions. He was very supportive, asked lots of questions, and at the end he wrote to me and said, "We teach English and maths, but we don't teach kindness enough." So I
True.
think we're just trying to teach we don't use the word kindness so much, we use the word thoughtful. So our course is called Creative Thoughtfulness, because if somebody says that was so thoughtful, it means they've thought about the act of kindness they're doing. Sometimes we can be kind, and it's not always. I've cringed at times when somebody's been a bit patronizing with their kindness, or
Yeah.
but if you've been thoughtful, and it's based on my dear mum who's no longer with us. But when I was in trouble, she was quite a strict mother. She would tell me off, and I go, "Sorry, mum, I didn't think." And she'd go, "Oh, so you're also thoughtless, because if you didn't think, that makes you thoughtless." And we call it, I think, in tribute to
True.
my mother, the course is called Creative Thoughtfulness in the Care of Others.
What brings you the most joy in the work that you do?
It's the people, it's the stories, always hearing the stories, and also how simply you can help somebody, and you get, I'm being selfish now, disproportionately praised for doing it. And I use the example that when you go into hospital to have a big operation, which I hope you never have to do, or hope you haven't ever had to do, is that yes, you've had an amazing operation. Skilled surgeons have treated you, medication has helped you recover afterwards with pain relief and also in the ongoing treatment of it. But I suspect that most of us, when we're in hospital, what we remember and what we tell our visitors when they come in is, "You see that porter over there? He was so kind this morning. He got me an extra pillow when I was feeling slightly uncomfortable. He got me a blanket when I was feeling cold. You see the receptionist, she remembered it was my birthday today and she knows I love dahlias and she brought me a picture with dahlias on it." Or you see, and it is those simple acts that get disproportionately praised. And I think, I've had phone calls this morning with a calendar of somebody wanting just to clarify something about where she could get hold of a calendar. And I said, "Oh, it's easy. They're in the libraries, they're in the pharmacies, they're in the hospital." And she went, "I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much." I just given her 4 words. It wasn't difficult. "Oh, that was so kind of you, blah, 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 blah." And it was, "I know you're busy. Thank you very much." I don't know who she is. She phoned me up. I was able to help her. And I suppose selfishly, yes, we do have huge frustrations. We are constantly seeking funding to keep going because there's so little money around. But the joy is seeing the connections work and making it happen.
I think we can all take a lot from this conversation we've had today, and that will stick with me now. Just about being thoughtful, just taking that moment, isn't it, and being thoughtful.
Yeah, I think so. And gosh, I'm not perfect. I'm only learning. I'm learning from other people all the time. But focusing on teaching that technique, if you like,
Yeah.
teaching.
Well, we can finish on that note. We're just going to draw this to a close now. And I really can't thank you enough, Jill, for taking the time to speak with us. And thank you for the fantastic work that you do and helping to spread this word about thoughtfulness and intergenerational. Everyone could just take so much from this conversation. So thank you
Well,
so much.
you're an amazing organization. We would love to work more with you if we could, on ways of, because we all
Absolutely.
say that collaborating with other dynamic organizations, well, I hope we're dynamic, but working
Yes.
with other organizations, having fun with it, and we're better than we're better than this expression, we're better than the sum of the parts. In other words, if two groups work together, you can do so much more than just double it. You can really pool each other's information. So please, I would love to do more than that. And thank you so much for being so patient with me. And I'm so glad we've got this interview done. It is ridiculously busy here. I'm sure you are the same because, we could just keep going forever. There's so
Yeah.
much of an issue out there at the moment, but thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jill.